too. So what is the Mythic Method? And what it is quite simple in a way. It's a method that begins with the listening to an oral story. And in doing so, that's honouring a time-honoured tradition of oral storytelling. And so what we have recorded on the Bard Mythology's website is a very wide cross-section of the Irish myths. And what you'll find in the journeys that you have signed up for, that the whole process or the whole journey begins with listening to the story. And so step one in the Mythic Method is listening. And step two is immersion. And immersion is something that people in oral societies naturally do. And if you ever watch a child listening to a story, a young child, it's almost as if there's no separation between them and the story. They jump in. And if you ever work with people from more oral cultures, they often are exactly the same. It's not as if there's them and the story with them as an observer. When they hear a story, they're in it. And so one of the things about the Mythic Method is it, in a way, encouraging that process of immersion. And there's various ways of doing that. And you'll find that there's some exercises that absolutely are about that immersive process. So step one's the listening, and step two is the immersion. And what's happened when that is gone through, or is that effectively you are removed from the everyday world. You're in a world that is in some way removed. And this is useful because, as the great media commentator Marshall McLuhan said, the one thing a fish knows nothing about is water. And it's almost the same with culture. If all we ever do is swim around in the same cultural groupings that we grew up with or went to school with or were born with, somehow there's a lack of awareness as to the water that you're swimming around in. And the beauty of becoming immersed in a story, in an oral tradition, is it provides a distance from the everyday from which you can see the everyday. And so there's something very elegantly simple about the process of listening to oral storytelling, particularly in a group. It distances you from where you are, and it enables you to see, if we carry on with this metaphor of the fish, it enables you to see the water or the culture in which you are immersed. Now, you could have the same effect from traveling, talking to someone from another culture, doing some study, but there's something wonderfully simple about listening to the mythic stories of your own culture in a group of people, maybe from your own culture or mixture of people from the culture and not. And it's powerful because it's a process of distancing, and as we've said before, it's always about today. So the first step is listen, and the second is immersion. And the effect is beginning to see things differently and see things from a distance. The next stage in the Mythic Method is to begin to distance yourself from the story and ask yourself what it's about. So this is an analytic stage, an analysis stage. And there's various ways of doing that. And one of the wonderful things about particularly intellectual developments in France and elsewhere in areas of literary criticism and a field called semiotics and indeed in folklore, is that there's some wonderful tools of making sense of the stories. Now, in a sense, the process of the analysis has begun because in distancing yourself from the culture you're in, you're already beginning to reflect on it. But it can be handy to also apply some tools of analysis. And one of the things that we cover on the journeys is some guidance as to reflecting on the tools that, reflecting on the story using the tools that you're given. So, listen, immerse, analyze. But then the next stage is an important one, which is reflect. And the reflection is to ask, if this is a myth that I'm living by, or that is the culture's living by, is this a myth that's serving me, serving us, serving the world? And the reflective stage is one of having been distanced, having analysed, is beginning to question individually and collectively, are these myths serving us? Are the archetypal and inspirational characters embedded within these myths serving us? And that is an important process. It's an important process of social and cultural reflection, but on an individual level, it may be personally very helpful. And in a way, what we've got is this process that we've talked about before, which is a way of seeing. Silver branch perception is what comes from this. And so, having listened, immersed, analysed and reflected, one of the next tasks is, well, so what? What are we going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? And one of the effects of an immersion in myths is that it's in some way invariably transformative. And if we come into it in a kind of mood of some sort, often a mood perhaps might be a negative one of fear or resentment or cynicism or despair, really, one of the effects of an engagement with these stories is that they're invariably transformative. One of the great compendiums, Ovid's Metamorphosis, is exactly what it says. It's stories of transformation. So in the process of engagement, invariably there's, as well as a reflection of the state that you're in, that possibilities emerge. And in doing so, we move on to the next stage of the Mythic Method, which is to become a producer and a teller of a myth. And that can take many, many forms, some of which are literally telling, writing, and others may be doing something in the world. It may be reshaping a mythology. It may be challenging something that's not right, that feels wrong. It may be doing something risky. It may be whatever. You know, there's just so many possibilities. In a way, what they are something that you as a traveller through the Mythic Method decide. But the task then is working with the mythic tradition, is somehow harrowing it in some way, which may be reconnecting with it and re-owning the archetypes that are within the story. It may be demythologizing bits of it, but at the end of the day, it's about becoming a teller and a liver of a story that feels right. So the fifth stage of the Mythic Method is about becoming a producer of a story, and then the final stage is about distributing it, getting it out there, and in a way becoming an agent of transformation that is the natural result of being a participant in a journey through which you as a listener to a transformative story were transformed, and in the process become a producer of a story that, through people listening to it, become transformed in a way that is right and that feels positive. And so that, in essence, is the Mythic Method. It's a facilitated journey, and what we've called it is the journey to the center, and whatever that may be. And the center might be seen as where things feel right and in harmony and aligned, and that as a participant there's a feeling of being empowered and, in a way, taking back a feeling of agency and control that in part comes from understanding and awareness that myths give, and in part comes from a feeling of inspiration and rightness. So that's the Mythic Method in essence, and it has in it both mythos, which is the first two stages, and in a way philos, which is, reflecting on. And in a way it's a weaving together, because Plato did quite a critical job on the Homeric tradition. But now what we're potentially talking about is a role for both the Homeric mythos, which is the first two stages, and the reflective process of analysis and reflection. But at the end of the day, it's about doing something, telling something that's right for the traveller, but also, in being right, will probably be right for others. So that's 6 stages, 6 steps. Listen, immerse, analyze, reflect, produce and distribute. Mythos, philos, mythophilos in action. That's the Mythic Method. That's what these journeys are about.